A janitor dies with $8 million. A Harvard-educated Wall Street executive declares bankruptcy. Same economy, same era, same markets available to both, and one leaves behind a fortune that shocks an entire town, while the other loses everything he spent a career building. The janitor never earned a high salary, never made a dramatic investment, never attended a single finance seminar or read a single market report. He just understood one thing that the executive never did. And that one thing is what we are unpacking today. Every concept, every story, every insight this book contains, so that by the time this ends, you will not need to read a single page yourself. This is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, and nothing about how you think about wealth will feel the same after this. Morgan Housel is not your typical finance writer. He spent years as a columnist at the Wall Street Journal and the Motley Fool, studying not just what markets do, but what people do when markets move. What he discovered over those years is both humbling and uncomfortable. The math of money has never been the problem. A child can understand compound interest. A teenager can grasp diversification. The formulas are simple. The human being running the formulas is where everything falls apart. And that is exactly what this book is about. Not strategies, not formulas, not tips, behavior. The invisible psychological forces that govern every financial decision you make, every impulse purchase, every panic sell, every month you meant to start saving and somehow never did. 19 chapters. No jargon. No complexity, just deeply human, research-backed wisdom about why we behave the way we do around money and how to behave better. Let us go deep. The first idea is the foundation everything else is built on, and most people reject it the first time they hear it. No one is. Crazy with money. This sounds like an excuse. It sounds like Housel is letting bad financial behavior off the hook. But that is not what he means at all. What he means is this. Every financial decision a person makes, no matter how irrational or self-destructive it looks from the outside, makes complete sense when you understand the personal history behind it. Think about someone who grew up watching their parents fight about money constantly, who saw their family lose everything during a financial crisis before they were old enough to have a bank account, who was told repeatedly, directly or indirectly, that money was dangerous, that wealthy people were corrupt, that security was something other people got to have. That person does not have a math problem. They have a psychology problem. And no budgeting app, no financial advisor, no investment strategy will fix it until the psychology underneath is honestly examined. Housel makes this vivid with one of the most powerful contrasts in the entire book. Ronald Read was a janitor and gas station attendant from rural Vermont. He drove old cars, wore second-hand clothes, split his own firewood well into his 90s. He never earned a meaningful salary. He never made a single dramatic investment move. He simply bought shares in companies he understood and never sold them. When he died in 2014 at the age of 92, he left behind an estate worth nearly $8 million. His local hospital and library received gifts they had never imagined possible. From a man most people had never once noticed, contrast Ronald Read with Richard Foscone, a Harvard MBA, a Merrill Lynch executive, decades of high-level financial experience, and every advantage the professional financial world could offer. And during the 2008 financial crisis, Foscone declared personal bankruptcy. His leveraged lifestyle and overconfident positions collapsed completely under the weight of a market he had fundamentally underestimated. Same era, same economy, same markets, completely opposite outcomes, not because of intelligence, not because of access, not because of opportunity, but because of psychology. Because of the deeply personal, largely unconscious beliefs and behaviors each man had built around money over an entire lifetime. Your financial behavior today was not chosen in a vacuum. It was shaped shaped by what you witnessed at the dinner table as a child, by whether money was discussed openly in your home or treated as a source of shame, by every financial win and loss you saw before you were old enough to understand what any of it meant. None of that history is your fault. But all of it is your responsibility to examine, because it is quietly governing your decisions today, whether you are conscious of it or not. Take a piece of paper right now and write down 3 beliefs about money you absorbed before the age of 15. Not what you know intellectually today, what you believed as a child. Was money scarce or abundant? Were wealthy people admirable or dangerous? Was saving wise or pointless for someone like you? Look at those 3 beliefs honestly and ask yourself how many of your financial decisions this month were silently driven by them. Because until you see the invisible framework, you cannot begin to change it. That is where it starts. The second idea cuts deeper, and most successful people actively resist it, because accepting it fully requires a kind of humility that feels threatening to everything they believe about their own achievements. Luck and risk shape financial outcomes far more powerfully than intelligence, skill, or effort alone. And until you genuinely internalize this, you will keep drawing the wrong lessons from both your successes and your failures. Housel tells the story of Bill Gates. Gates attended Lakeside School in Seattle, one of the only high schools in the entire United States that had a computer terminal in 1968. One school out of roughly 30,000 across the country. Gates himself has acknowledged that without Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. He was brilliant, he was driven, he worked with extraordinary discipline, but he also received a piece of luck so perfectly timed and so completely outside his control that it gave him a 10-year head start over virtually every other future technologist on the planet. And then Housel tells the story of Kent Evans, Gates's closest friend at Lakeside. Equally brilliant, equally passionate, equally positioned for what looked like an extraordinary future. Kent Evans died in a mountaineering accident before he ever had the chance to build anything at all. Same talent, same environment, same starting point, completely different fate. Not because of a decision Evans made, not because of a character flaw or a failure of will, but because of the random, unpredictable, ruthless mathematics of risk. Why does this matter to your financial life? Because when you genuinely internalize how large a role luck and risk play in outcomes, 3 things change immediately. You become more humble about your successes, which protects you from the overconfidence that leads directly to catastrophic risk-taking. You become more compassionate about your failures, which frees you from the shame spiral that keeps people from getting back up. And you start building genuine protection against downside, because you understand that no amount of skill fully insulates you from the unpredictable. Unpredictable. Ask yourself this right now. If something genuinely unexpected happened tomorrow, a job loss, a medical emergency, a market collapse, how exposed are you? Because the practical lesson of luck and risk is not paralysis. It is resilience. Build enough financial buffer that no single bad event can permanently destroy what you have built. Because bad events are not a possibility. They are a certainty. The only unknown is the timing. The third idea has quietly destroyed more high earners than almost any other financial mistake, and it is almost never discussed with the honesty it deserves. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy are 2 entirely different skill sets, and most people who master one never bother to develop the other. Think about every lottery winner story you have ever heard. People who received millions in a single moment and were bankrupt within 5 years. Think about the professional athletes, players who earned hundreds of millions over their careers and filed for bankruptcy before 50. These are not unintelligent people. They are people who mastered one specific financial skill and assumed, completely incorrectly, that the same skill would carry them through an entirely different challenge. Getting wealthy requires Optimism, boldness, calculated risk-taking, aggression toward opportunity, the confidence to bet on yourself before the outcome is certain. These are powerful qualities in the right context, but staying wealthy requires almost the complete opposite. It requires humility, a genuine, healthy fear of losing what you have already built, frugality even when frugality is no longer financially necessary, the consistent, grounded awareness that the world changes without warning and that no past success makes you immune to future loss. The goal, Housel says, is not to make the most brilliant financial moves. The goal is to survive long enough for compounding to do its work, to stay in the game, to never be forced out by a single loss or a single moment of overconfidence. Compounding only works across long stretches of time, and long stretches of time require one thing above everything else: survival. Survival. Above everything. Survival. Ask yourself honestly right now, does my current financial behavior reflect the skills of getting wealthy or the skills of staying wealthy? Are you carrying risks that could permanently wipe out what you have already built? Do you have a genuine buffer, an emergency fund, manageable debt, a diversified foundation? That means no single event destroys everything. Because the wealthiest people alive are not the ones who made the biggest bets. They are the ones who never had to. Start over. The fourth idea is the one most people believe they understand, and almost nobody truly feels at the level that actually changes: behavior. Compounding is the most powerful force in personal finance, and its power is almost impossible to grasp intuitively, because human beings are simply not wired to think exponentially. Warren Buffett is worth over $100 billion, but here is the number that changes everything. Roughly 97% of Warren Buffett's net worth was accumulated after his 65th birthday. Not in his 30s when he was building his name. Not in his 50s when he was already legendary. After 65, time did the overwhelming majority of the work. Not genius, not strategy, not timing. Time. Housel runs a thought experiment that should permanently rewire how you think about investing. If Buffett had started at age 30 instead of age 10 and retired at 65 like a normal person instead of continuing into his 90s, his net worth today would be approximately $11 million instead of over $100 billion. Same strategy, same discipline, same legendary skill, just fewer decades of compounding. The difference between 11 million and 100 billion is not genius. It is simply time. And consider Jim Simons, founder of Renaissance Technologies and mathematically one of the greatest traders in history. Simons has compounded money at roughly 66% annually since 1988, a rate far higher than Buffett's. But Simons started serious investing in his 50s, and his net worth, extraordinary as it is, remains a fraction of Buffett's. Better annual returns, less time, dramatically smaller outcome. The math is brutal in its clarity. If you are not yet investing consistently, start this week. Not next month, not when you feel more financially stable. This week, the amount is almost irrelevant compared to the act of beginning, because the single most valuable variable in your entire financial future is not how much you invest today. It is how many years you give your money to compound. Every month you delay is a month of exponential growth you will never recover. Not reduce, not postpone, never. Recover. Never. Recover. The fifth idea reframes what wealth actually means. And for most people, this reframe is genuinely the most liberating thing in the entire book. The highest thing money can buy is not any object, not any experience, not any status symbol. It is control over your own time. Housel cites research showing that beyond a genuine baseline of material security, the things that most reliably produce lasting human happiness are autonomy, meaningful relationships, and purposeful work. not the size of your house, not the brand of your car, the freedom to decide how you spend your hours, who you spend them with, and what you are actually building with your days. And here is the truth that almost nobody in the consumer culture around you will ever tell you. Real wealth is almost entirely invisible. It is the money you chose not to spend, the investment account compounding quietly while your colleagues are upgrading their lifestyles, the ability to say no to opportunities that pay well but cost you your autonomy, the ability to wait when everyone around you is rushing, the ability to choose when most people have no real choice at all. That invisible accumulated freedom is worth infinitely more than any visible display of success you could ever purchase, because visible success is performance, and invisible wealth is power. What would genuine financial freedom actually look like in your specific life? Not in someone else's life, yours. How many months of expenses saved would make you feel genuinely secure tomorrow morning? What would you do differently with your time if money stopped being the deciding factor in your choices? Write that answer down clearly and specifically, because that vision is not a fantasy. It is your actual financial North Star. And without a North Star, every financial decision you make is just noise. The sixth idea is one Housel presents quietly, but it carries more practical weight than almost anything else in the book. Saving money for no specific reason is one of the most powerful financial habits you will ever build. Most personal finance advice arrives attached to a target. Save for a house, save for retirement, save for your children's education. And those goals matter, but Housel argues that the most powerful savings of all are the ones with no specific purpose attached to them whatsoever. Why? Because the future is not a spreadsheet. The future is unpredictable, messy, surprising, and filled with events you could not possibly have anticipated from where you are standing today. He calls this your Freedom Fund, money that exists not to buy a specific thing, but to give you options, and options, the ability to pivot, to wait, to say no, to survive the unexpected, are one of the most valuable things a human being can possess in an uncertain world. The person with a Freedom Fund sleeps differently than the person without one. They make decisions differently. They negotiate differently. They move through the world with a quiet confidence that has nothing to do with income and everything to do with preparation. Options change everything. Options change everything. Open a separate savings account this week. Label it Freedom Fund and begin, even a small amount. Because what that account represents is not a number. It is options, and options in an unpredictable world are everything. Buy. The seventh idea is the one that will sting the most, because if you are honest with yourself, you will recognize it immediately. Lifestyle creep is the silent, invisible destroyer of long-term wealth for millions of high earners, and almost nobody sees it happening until it is years too late. Here is exactly how it works. You get a raise, and the apartment gets a little nicer. You get a bonus, and the holiday gets a little bigger. The restaurants improve. The car upgrades. The wardrobe expands. None of these individual changes feel extravagant. Each one feels completely earned. But the cumulative effect, absorbed so gradually you barely notice it happening, is that your expenses rise in near-perfect lockstep with your income. And the wealth that every raise and bonus was supposed to generate never materializes. Housel makes a point here that cuts through every rationalization. Wealth is not what you spend. Wealth is what you do not spend. The person building genuine lasting wealth is almost never the one driving the most impressive car in the neighborhood, wearing the most expensive watch in the room, or living in the biggest house their income technically allows. Real wealth is built by the person who drove the same modest car for 10 years when they could have upgraded every 3 and quietly invested the difference every single month. Open your bank statements from 3 years ago and compare your monthly spending then to your monthly spending today. Has your spending grown faster than your savings? For every major category that has increased, ask yourself one honest question. Did this genuinely improve my life in a lasting, meaningful way, or did it simply become the new normal, raising the baseline without raising the satisfaction? Because lifestyle creep does not just steal your money, it steals your ability to notice that it is gone. Buy. The eighth idea separates people who read about money from people who actually build it, and it lives entirely in the gap between knowing and doing. Reasonable behavior beats rational behavior. Every single time. The perfectly rational financial decision and the decision you will actually stick to for 20 years are rarely the same decision. And a strategy you abandon at the first sign of discomfort is infinitely worse than a slightly imperfect strategy you maintain consistently through every market condition, because consistency over time is worth more than optimization in any single moment. Housel gives a powerful example. The mathematically optimal investment strategy during volatile markets is almost always to stay fully invested, to do nothing, to hold, to ignore the noise. Every piece of data supports this. Every historical chart confirms it. And yet, millions of intelligent, financially educated people sell in panic during every single market downturn because the mathematically optimal strategy does not account for how terrifying it feels to watch your savings drop 30% in real time. The investor who earns 10% annually and never panics will always outperform the investor who earns 12% in good years and sells everything in fear during the bad ones. The gap is not knowledge. The gap is not strategy. The gap is discipline, emotional discipline, consistent, quiet, unglamorous discipline. Ask yourself right now, is my current financial strategy one I can genuinely maintain during a 40% market crash, a job loss, a global recession? If the honest answer is no, then your strategy is not actually your strategy. It is a fair weather plan waiting for the first storm to destroy it. Build a strategy you can live with, not just one that looks perfect on paper. Buy. The ninth idea challenges one of the most deeply held assumptions in modern financial culture, and once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. The price of investment returns is not paid in dollars, it is paid in volatility, uncertainty, and fear, and most people are trying to get the returns without paying the price. Housel uses a simple analogy. If you want a new car, you pay the price. You do not walk into a dealership, take the car, and refuse to pay because the price feels uncomfortable. That would be theft. But in investing, millions of people do the financial equivalent of this every single day. They want the long-term returns of the stock market, but they refuse to pay the price of sitting through the terrifying volatility that generates those returns. They want the destination without the discomfort of the journey. The S&P 500 has delivered extraordinary long-term returns across its entire history, but within that history are crashes of 30, 40, 50%, years of flat or negative returns, periods of uncertainty so intense that selling felt not just reasonable but urgent. Every single one of those uncomfortable periods was the price of the long-term gain. Not an anomaly, not a malfunction, the price. The investors who built lasting wealth did not find a clever way to avoid paying this price. They simply accepted it more willingly than everyone else. They reframed volatility, not as a sign that something was wrong, but as the entirely predictable cost of something going right over time. When the market drops, the question is not whether to panic. The question is whether you have already decided in advance, calmly, with a clear mind, that you are willing to pay the price. Because making that decision in the middle of a crash is already too late. Buy. The 10th idea is the one that quietly underlies every other idea in this book, and it is the one most personal finance content completely ignores. The word is enough. Enough is one of the most powerful and most rare concepts in the modern world, and the inability to define it has destroyed more wealthy people than poverty ever could. Housel tells the story of Raja Gupta, a man who rose from genuine poverty in India to become the CEO of McKinsey, one of the most prestigious positions in the entire global business world. By any reasonable definition, Gupta had achieved extraordinary, life-changing, generational success. He was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had everything the financial world could offer. And it was not enough. He wanted to be a billionaire. That desire led him to insider trading, a federal conviction, and the complete destruction of everything he had spent an entire lifetime building. Housel also references Bernie Madoff, a man who was already legitimately wealthy before he ever ran his fraudulent scheme. He did not need to steal. He was already successful by any rational measure. But the concept of enough had never been defined, and without that definition, more became the only direction available. More, always more, until more consumed everything. The inability to define enough is not just a moral failure, it is a financial one. It leads to unnecessary risk-taking to grow wealth that is already sufficient. It leads to the destruction of genuinely good outcomes in pursuit of perfect ones. It leads to a life spent perpetually arriving and never actually being anywhere. What is your enough? Not a vague feeling, a specific, honest, personal definition. How much saved makes you genuinely secure? What income level allows you to live the life that actually matters to you? What does a day look like when money is no longer the dominant factor in your decisions? Write that down. Make it real.